There could be more though. They're still armed.
Oh, fun. 13. Plenty of reading this time.
We're done.
Now you're into great grandpa.
Yeah.
Great. Grandpa. No, greats.
Thank you.
My oldest just turned 18, so daughter.
I know she checked the brewery.
Here we go.
Well,
Call the meeting of this Planning Commission to order this September 18th, 2019. If staff could call roll, please.
Connie Coleman-Lackady. Don Daniels.
Here.
James Guerrero.
Here.
Nancy Hudson Eccles.
Present.
Ryan Pearson.
Here.
Paul Wegman.
Present.
Christopher Weber.
here,
You have quorum.
Great. Before us, we have the minutes of September 4th, 2019. Looking for a motion.
Make a motion that we accept the minutes as written.
Mr. Wagaman first.
Second.
Mr. Guerrero second. Any discussion or changes? Hearing or seeing none. All those in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh, where's that feedback?
Hearing none, the motion pass as written. Sorry. That's me, loud. Any changes to our agenda tonight?
yes, Mr. Chair, just the order of the agenda. If we could move the public hearings listed under item 7 above item 6, otherwise everything stays the same.
Great, thank you. At this time, we have public comment. Anyone wishing to speak can speak on any topic to my fellow commissioners. If you're here tonight to talk about the two public hearings, I would request that you wait until that time so that it could be recorded, put into record. So at this time, I'll open up the public comment for any subject that you wish to speak to us about. If there's anyone in the audience wishing to speak. Mr. Glenn. Just state your name and the city you reside in, please.
Glenn Spaeth, Lakewood. This last weekend, Saturday night, there was an initial opening of the Lakewood History Museum as a part of the Colonial Plaza opening. And we were hastily moving for 3 days to get there. At least we had a showing. We hope to be complete by 2nd of October. And we invite you all to visit. We didn't do too bad on that Saturday because we at least had a good part of the museum set up. But it's going to be a long-term process. And I think we did pretty good. We had over 200 and probably close to 250 that visited that night. So it's not bad for a 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock effort.
Yeah.
So any of those of you that would like to take a look, we'll be open that first week of October.
Great,
So thank you.
thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak under public comment tonight? Any other individuals with seeing or hearing none? We'll close public comment at this time. And as staff recommended, we're moving number 7 up to the next on our agenda. And we'll start off with the continuation of the Lakewood Municipal Development Code Title 18A hearing. This is a continuation of the public hearing that was from September 4th. So we'll open this back up, and we have 2 individuals that have signed up to speak, I believe, on this. So Mr. Tim Purrier.
I'm Tim Purrier. I'm the property manager for the Lakewood Industrial Park, and I reside in Tacoma, Washington, but my office is here at the Lakewood Industrial Park. I provided written comments to staff on a few items on 18A. Those will be packaged up and presented to you in a week or so. But there's one item on there that I wanted to elaborate on slightly, just to give you a little more color on the issue. And it's an area that I didn't think we'd have any issues on, but I finally got my lighting consultant to kind of look at the new lighting code. And there's one little piece in there that I would like everybody to focus on, maybe just to see if there's something that can be done to adjust it. When you are looking specifically at how you light a truck court where the docks are in an industrial building, there's a unique lighting problem that occurs, and that doesn't occur in almost any other situation. If you look at a regular auto parking lot, you have no problem putting pole lights every 50 feet or every 100 feet to get the lighting you want out over the area. But in a truck court, where you do need lighting at night because there's a lot of trucks running around, it's not a very safe place in the dark, that you need some good lighting. You can't put light poles out 100 feet from the truck docks because those trucks have a nasty habit of hitting them. So the solution is you put the lights on the building, and traditionally you've shined them out into the parking area. Well, with the new Dark Skies initiative and the concept of bug that they're trying to present, you can't really shine them out. So in order to get the coverage you need, which is, in my opinion, at least 75 feet to get out past the 53-foot trailer, you need to go higher. For some reason, the code, and I've got the notation here, but it's in my written comments, it'll be easy to find, has right now in the, all three of the lighting zones are going to be here, lighting zone 1, 2, and 3. Lighting 1 right at the end of the runway is at 20 feet. There might be a reason for that. But the rest of the city is pretty much lighting zone 2, which sets the maximum height of the lights at 25 feet on a building face. The interesting thing is, if you put them on a pole, which I guess you could do right next to the building, it's unlimited as near as I can read. But on the building, it has to be limited at 25 feet. It seems like going against the purpose of trying to provide good, safe lighting that doesn't shine up in the air. So I'm not sure that the 25-foot height restriction is providing a benefit or if it's really doing more harm. And basically, the reason I'm bringing this and wanting to talk in a little more color is that I think this is in the industrial environment, in the truck court where you have all these moving pieces, it is a real safety concern of mine. And I would recommend, if possible, that the height limit be eliminated, because there really aren't that many 25, 35, 40-foot buildings other than industrial buildings in the city. So we're really just talking about removing the height limit from industrial buildings, as I read it. And since these are all now commercial down lights, none of the new lights do uplighting anyway, I don't see the damage to the port, or to the airport, to the military base from having it 10 feet higher or whatever would be appropriate. So first, I would ask if we could just eliminate the height altogether off of that table. It's table 2 in 0.095 of the code. I think it's 0.60 of 18A. If we could eliminate it altogether, that'd be great. At a minimum, I'd like to see 35 feet, because that's a pretty standard height now for industrial buildings. I think that would be good for the city and for future development. 40 feet would be better. So that's the one item I just wanted to add some color to, and my thought that's kind of a unique problem to industrial buildings and trying to get the light out into the truck court without having poles. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Next we have signed up is Gregory Bush.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Gregory Bush. I'm with Wireless Policy Group here tonight on behalf of AT&T. Wireless Policy Group's offices are in Issaquah, Washington. So I would like to follow up from AT&T's previous written comments and my own previous spoken comments, clarifying that AT&T requests the Commission revisit language in Section 18A.95.090D11. That's the one, the priority of location section. This has confusing language as well as a requirement that applicants for wireless communications facilities in a specific zone show that other technology cannot be used in order to locate in that zone. And federal law unfortunately prohibits a local jurisdiction from specifying the kind of technology that can be used in wireless communications facilities. And I'm available if the commission has any questions. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for your comments. Okay, this is a public hearing, continuation of the Title 18A. Anyone else wishing to speak tonight on that subject, the 18A? Okay, hearing or seeing none. Mr. Buer, you had a comment?
If there are no further comments from the audience, I know there'll be further discussion on this, but I would suggest that you continue the public hearing to the next meeting, if
Continuance?
that's what you wish to do.
Okay, if, so are you saying that there are possibly more comments coming in?
There could be some additional comments, and I wanted to provide some clarification on a few issues, so I want to make sure there's an opportunity for the public to hear it.
Okay,
And we're fine as far as timeline on this. It's just, I want to keep it open, give everyone the opportunity to listen to some of the things that are coming forward. It's not a big issue, but yes, I'm just trying to be careful.
great. Any suggestions or opinions in regarding to Mr. Buer's request to hold it open? Everyone's fine with that? Okay, so we will continue again until October
16.
16th?
Yes.
Okay, so this public hearing on the Title 18A will be in a continuance till the October 16th. Thank you. Great, thank you, Mr. Buer. Thank you for everyone that had the input. We appreciate it as well. So we go back to the number rezone, excuse me, a rezone of 6 parcels from OSR 2 to OSR 1 of the north of the Western State Hospital in Fort Steilacoom Park. Ms. Tiffany.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tiffany Spear on behalf of the city. If you look at your second staff report, which was sent to you yesterday, and hopefully you were all able to access that. Within that, you'll see, starting on page, it says page 1, great. Page 20 is a staff report specifically related to this area-wide rezone regarding not 6 parcels, but 5, just north of Western State Hospital on the land that was currently used for the Fort Steilacoom Golf Course. The hearing is scheduled for this evening on this rezone. There's just a clarification that there were 6 parcels identified in the last time this was brought to you, but in fact, that was an error on staff's part. It's only 5. There was a boundary line adjustment which occurred in 2018 that hadn't been reflected yet on one of these maps, hence the error. So in any event, what we're talking about are 5 parcels rather than 6. They're all either owned by Pierce County or the state of Washington. Within your memo, you'll see the maps on page, it's called page 2, but I believe it's page 21 of the packet. There's both just a parcel map, and then you'll see a topographical map. So the parcels in question are heavily treed or are the former golf course. And then just to the north of them, you'll see a residential area that's built out. If the maps went further to the south, you would see Fort Steilacoom Park itself. Starting on the next page within the staff report, you'll see a breakout of the various uses that are allowed either outright by administrative approval or by conditional approval for OSR 2 versus OSR 1. Essentially, OSR 1 is a more passive zone, so fewer things would be allowed. And then there's explanations about which each one of those uses that's discussed, the different levels that are discussed in the code. So should you have any question and want to dive a little deeper into, for instance, what transportation level 2 versus level 1 means, you have that information as well. And then the last part of this memo for you are the 8 criteria that you would be considering when you make your recommendations to council about whether or not this rezone is appropriate. So with that, I'll just leave it for public hearing.
Great, thank you. So at this time, we're going to hold a public hearing regarding the rezone of 5 parcels from OSR 2 to OSR 1 north of the Western State Hospital in Fort Steilacoom Park. We'll open it up for the public to give us any testimonial at this time. I have no one that has signed up, but I will ask anyone in the audience wishing to speak to the fellow commissioners and myself, if you wish to speak on this topic, you're more than welcome to come up to the podium, state your name and the city you reside in, and we'll listen. Anyone willing or able or wanting to speak regarding this? Yep, go ahead, you can come up here. If you come up here, ma'am, sorry, for testimonial purposes and stuff, if you just state your name and the city you reside in, you can ask your question. And
My name is Liz Casio, and I live in the Oak Brook area in Lakewood. We're concerned about the parcels behind us. We want to know what is the definition of OSR 1 or 2, because we're concerned about if there's anything going to be built behind, because our property has a boundary behind it that has this open space. So we're concerned of anything that's going to be built behind that property that will oversee our homes.
great, okay, and the staff will be able to answer that question as well. Anyone, you want to answer it now, Ms. Tiffany?
I'll provide you with the written comment that we provided to the Planning Commission about this, but essentially OSR means open space and recreation, and what's being proposed is actually moving from open space and recreation level 2 to level 1. So it will remain in open space, but there are a few different things that are no longer allowed under OSR 1. So if it were to get rezoned, there'd be fewer things allowed rather than what are allowed right now. But I'll give you that information in hard copies. You can take a look at that in more detail. Feel free to contact us with questions.
Mr. Buer?
I would just add a little few remarks that Open Space 1 is the most restrictive open space zoning district in the city of Lakewood. And it's primarily used for large open space areas, for example, Fort Steilacoom Park, or also along Chambers Creek.
Anyone else wishing to speak tonight regarding this topic? Okay, any other comments from? Okay, at this time then, seeing or hearing no other comments on this, we'll close the public hearing on the rezone of 5 parcels from OSR 2 to OSR 1, north of Western State Hospital in Fort Steilacoom Park. We'll close the public hearing. Thank you for all your comments. Okay, we're going to go back to number 5, I believe, is the 6 to unfinished business, the Lakewood Municipal Code, Development Code Title 18 update discussion. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Appreciate it. Jeez, I got a frog in my throat. Yes, Ms. Tiffany.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, Tiffany Spear. So tonight, we are continuing the conversation now about 18A, and as was just mentioned by Mr. Buer, it looks like the October 2nd date is probably premature to try to take action because there continues to be not only feedback from stakeholders, but also internal staff review, which keeps popping up more needed amendments. So what we're going to do tonight is walk through where we sit right now with some responses to some comments provided by Commissioner Guerrero and a few other people on September 4th. And then just to let you know that we do have a number of other questions that have come in since that we will provide answers to by the next time you bring this topic in front of you. So where we sit, we've had at least 4 meetings here at the Planning Commission on this issue. We've also held a public hearing, which was continued tonight now into October. The discussion tonight will occur, and then at this point, we're thinking action on October 16th, but again, that's up in the air. It depends on your comfort level and whether you feel ready to do so. Should it move forward on October 16th, it would then go to the council within a couple of weeks, and they would be looking at it starting October 28th. But again, that's pending, so we'll see. Once again, you've all seen this before. This is the comparison between the old code chapters and the new code. The signs chapter, which is down there at the bottom right, 18A100, is simply picking up verbatim what was adopted a few months ago by council regarding signs. And then the wireless service facilities is a general restructuring, but not a substantive change to the emergency interim regulations that have been in place since January. The second staff report that I just mentioned to you includes information starting on page 1 regarding some responses to questions again from Commissioner Guerrero. And I believe Dave Buer is going to take the lead on walking you through the responses that are included in here. And then on page 12 of this memo, you'll see, starting with Roman numeral 2 through 6, you'll see a number of other questions that have been raised by other stakeholders that staff has not yet answered. And so these will be provided, answers will be provided to you by your next discussion of 18A. I'll go through those quickly, and then we'll move backward to Mr. Guerrero's comments and our responses. So there was a discussion item brought up by Mr. Puryear in the last hearing regarding Table 18A 40040 about manufacturing assembly. That's something that will be amended and included in your next version of the code. There was a discussion from Verizon Wireless, just saying they support the draft wireless service facility chapter as it sits. And then, as you heard tonight from Mr. Bush, there's still some concern and question from AT&T regarding one particular section, so that's something that we'll be reviewing. Then there was a comment actually made by Mr. Spieth regarding the category that his antique shop might fall under, and so we'll clarify that for the next meeting as well. And then we today, we meaning staff, had a conference call with Mr. David Kruger from WIG Properties, who also had provided us some written comment that I believe were emailed to you also as part of this staff report regarding a number of questions through 18A different chapters of this title, and those will be answered in substance for you for your next meeting. So other than that, I'm not sure if the commission members are going to have additional questions, but I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Buer to start walking you through the staff responses.
Great, thank you.
I'll begin with the first question that Mr. Guerrero proposed, which regarding stacking spaces for restaurant and beverage uses. We've also received some additional comments from WIG Properties about stacking, and rather than trying to answer this question this evening, I would like to put the two together and then bring back that for further discussion with the commission.
Okay.
The discussion on restaurants and fast food restaurants and drive-throughs will take a considerable amount of time before you reach conclusion. So I'm just letting you know in advance. The next topic is, does the proposed code address Airbnbs? These are actually called short-term rentals under our current code. They're found in 18A 40090B2, and there are three conditions. One, a conditional business license wherein the operator provides basic information on the rental and contact data, a notice to abutting property owners, and an inspection by the building division and fire district, and actually number 4, provision for a guest log. We've had the opportunity to review that with the city attorney's office. They are recommending that we drop the guest log because that has been an issue with hotels and motels at the state level, and that we also drop the notice to abutting property owners. So those two changes will come back to you in a final version to the Planning Commission. We'd also point out there are numerous vacation rentals in the city of Lakewood. You may or may not know this. Airbnbs, we have an account, we check where they're at, and they are considerable in number, just FYI. Our position on Airbnbs, if people are going to rent, let's make sure that they have a business license, number 1, and 2, that what they're doing meets basic health and safety code, which are similar requirements the Department of Health has on hotels and motels, and we likewise have in regards to rental housing. Number 3, Commissioner Guerrero asked that we combine residential accessory buildings and residential accessory.
I'm sorry, Mr. Buer. Would you want to take questions as we go?
It's up to you.
Okay, so we'll do that. So Mr. Wegeman.
On the Airbnb, are we going to require them, if they do that, to meet all the ADA requirements?
I don't think so, no. We're talking basic health and safety, but I'll have to get back with you on more details. So the intent here is not to over-regulate Airbnbs. The thought is if you have special ADA requirements, that would be a part of your research and contract you have with the individual.
I think the legislature last session, was considering doing that, and created a lot of tension for the Airbnb folks, and so I was just wondering where we were going to come down on that. So you're saying less regulation as long as they're reasonably safe? Okay.
I mean, we do the same thing with rental housing. We don't make people go through and update their ADA requirements based upon the existing structure. So I don't see why we would do it with this particular use, but I don't mind going back and checking on that.
Well, I'm not suggesting we do. I'm just wondering what our position is going to be, since the legislature went down that road and, it's got a little ugly last year.
Let's just do the research on it and get back with you.
So, Mr. Bueller, just a clarification as well, on Mr. Guerrero's recommendations on the Airbnbs as well, and staff is recommending no to the notification of abutting properties, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Bueller at this time? Okay, Mr.
I'll just keep
Bueller,
going.
Keep going.
The next one is, we have two different definitions for accessory buildings and residential accessory uses. Is it possible to combine the two? I think the answer is yes, but we haven't got the language put together just yet.
Okay.
Number 4 had to do with home occupations, and suggested that one of the current language comes out of I believe our current code. And one of the things it says is that we control the number of vehicle trip hours to the licensed residents, and accept that for one continuous 3-hour period per month, the home occupation may generate up to 10 vehicles. That might be a little too high, and so the suggestion was, as I read it, was to delete it, so that's what we're doing on this section. And again, we'll go through this in great detail before we do a final ordinance, but I just wanted to give you our first read. Next was allowing home occupations in the MR2 zone. My experience has been that property management firms in the MR2 zones don't necessarily allow or permit home occupations as a matter of right because of density issues, parking and other things. So that's why we were suggesting it be prohibited in the MR2 zone.
Yeah, Mr. Guerrero.
Just to comment on that, I don't necessarily, it just seemed like an inconsistency to me, but because you'll have areas that are MR2 zone now that have less density than would be allowed, so you might have, say, a residential, just regular residential area in an MR2 now. I think this would not allow home occupations because of the zoning, even though regular single-family does allow. Is that accurate?
I don't think so. I believe I'm in an MR2 and I have a business in my garage.
Okay.
So if this ordinance, if we change this, any new business in MR2 couldn't be in a.
Yeah, we'd be like non-compliant, but I was also going to kind of cover that under the 040 with the winery brewery thing, so.
Yeah, it does make some sense to me that if the zoning, if you have that density, maybe you don't have businesses in it, but it does kind of limit what's happening now, I guess.
I think it's really clear in the MF1 and MF2 zones, where you have higher density, when you're allowed up to 54 units or more, say, for example, in the central business district, property owners, managers are not going to allow people to do home occupations. But you're in this range here, a no man's land, where do you cut it off? Okay.
Okay, continue, Mr. Bueller.
Next subject was taxi services, and the current code doesn't really address taxi services, so I gave you a couple of options of how you want to address it or may want to address it. Right now, the only taxi service that we have in town is located in an industrial zone, located off of Lakeview Avenue. Taxi services generally are composed of 3 things: a dispatch office, a place to store vehicles, and the third piece is a place to make minor repair and maintenance. So we can either create a category for taxi services, that's one option. And we'll come back with you on that before, with a recommendation, unless the commission has a formal position on this evening. Okay. Lyft and Uber was the next topic, and we do not regulate Lyft and Uber through the land use regulations. So far, that seems to be a topic that cities, if they wish to regulate it, do it as a part of a business license function or something like that.
So to clarify, so if I was to be a Lyft or Uber driver, I would have to get a city permit?
No,
No. Okay,
they're just difficult to track.
right, no problem, just clarifying.
The next issue had to do with special needs housing. I understood the question having to deal with enhanced services facilities where we allow up to 16 individuals, which is a requirement under state law. This is found in the section of the code dealing with special needs housing. There's a chart which goes through and lists various types of special needs. We have column out group 1, group 2, group 3, et cetera, ESFs. We spent some time going through state regulations, looking for other types of group homes and trying to categorize them. So that's where all that comes from. And then we try to include the definitions in the definition section of the code. This is one area where I'm sure that there's a lot of interest. The current code doesn't make this very clear. The new code or revised code does.
And Mr. Guerrero?
I didn't write my comment very clearly. I was actually wanting to address the confidential shelter. So the enhanced services facility is pretty clearly isolated into specific zones. This confidential shelters are allowed in all residential zones. And I absolutely think it's a needed thing that we have there. I am concerned with the number of people allowed. It's 15 plus a staff. And I think if you got to those numbers, it would be really noticeable in a community. But I don't know if there's any other federal law related to the size of those.
The confidential shelters refer to families involved in domestic violence. Usually the woman along with the children leave the house with nothing, and then they're looking for a place to live. There are several places in the city of Tacoma that provide for confidential shelters. Sometimes they're in small apartment complexes. I'm aware of one that used to be run by Korea Women's Association. It's confidential because they don't want the spouse to know where they're at. They also provide for training and education to take these individuals and to, bring them up. It's somewhat sort of semi-permanent housing. And then once they're stabilized, they try to move them from confidential shelter into a normal house or something like that. These are very hard to find. There's always a shortage. I just put the number down at 15 or whatever it is because you need to have some level of fairly large number to address the issue. I will tell you that there are currently a confidential shelter in a single-family residential neighborhood with 10 people living there.
So was staff just, I mean, is there anything that we can resemble, other cities locally, DuPont, or is it hard in their regulations to have that number? 15 sounded awful high as well.
So what I'm hearing from you and other commissioners, to go back and take a look at the number to see if the number is too high? Is that what you're suggesting?
I would.
Yes, I totally agree with having those in residential areas and being kind of hidden, if you will, but that number seemed really high.
The 15 number is something that I'm aware of for other confidential shelters about what the number and size looks like. And generally, you see them in medium-sized apartment complexes. There's several in the vicinity of downtown Tacoma.
So when you say medium-sized apartment complex, they would, 15, if that was the number, is in one apartment building?
Usually it's the entire apartment building.
Oh, so,
wait.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So it's not a single unit?
No.
Oh,
I was envisioning it, so in Oak Brook, for example, one house supporting 15
No.
people, which is what I would interpret this to say.
Well, I have seen it happen in the Clover Park neighborhood, and we have 9 people living in a single-family house.
Right, and that seems kind of like at the upper end of what would be secret, if you will.
But at the same time, these are considered to be group homes under state law and are considered to be essential public facilities. And so this is,
which is regulated up to 16.
Well-
Or,
for there's essential public facilities, and then there's essential services facilities. Essential services facilities has a maximum of 16. Essential public facilities is somewhat different. Now, Tacoma went through this exercise several years ago to try to address special needs housing. Much of what they proposed ended up on appeal to the Growth Hearings Board because DSHS was unhappy because they reduced the numbers. Okay, so they negotiated an agreement with DSHS and they came up with numbers. What my attempt was to do was to take a look at our existing level of group homes. What numbers do we have that have already gone through the Growth Hearings Board and no objection? And take a look at the city of Tacoma example to see if we can fit something in that will pass a test in the event there is an appeal. Now, if you're asking me to go back and take a look at the number of group home units, we can certainly do that.
yeah, my feeling is that threshold would be in the neighborhood of 10, but that's my personal opinion, so.
Mine aligns with that. But if there's state or federal
Yeah,
law that says
right.
no, fine.
Yeah. Right, okay. Any other comments? Hearing none. Okay, Mr. Bjork, continue.
These are all, by the way, good questions, and it's the same stuff that we struggle with. The next one had to deal with the AC1 and AC2 zoning districts. The AC2 zoning district, which is the less restrictive of the two, does allow for single-family residential housing if the lot is equal to or greater than 20,000 square feet. If it's less than 20,000 square feet, the existing uses are non-conforming. The AC1 zone would not allow any housing of any kind under the proposed code. However, I would also point out that we do have existing apartment complexes and mobile home parks in the AC1 zone.
Mr. Guerrero?
So relative to this, and it's more just a question that, so the air corridor zones now have some pockets of single-family residential on fairly small lots. And I understand we're aligning with what the base wants to happen. Ultimately, is it the vision of the city that those areas have to de-densify? I mean, that's kind of what the code says. So they would have to have 20,000 square foot lots or bigger in order to support single-family, which is one of the few things we can do there, right?
Yes. That's a straightforward answer. I will also tell you that if a person comes in and proposes a remodel, if the remodel consists of kitchen and bathroom things, that's fine. But if you're asking to expand conditioned space, it goes through the administrative review process. And it's not guaranteed it will be approved because you're actually increasing the number of people, on the lot. We've adopted some new storage container standards. So you've seen these pods show up that are not properly addressed in our code, so we're trying to address that. There's some, we've made some minor text changes that we need to go back, or errors that we need to go back and fix. Requirement for sloped roofs, I gave the example of under general design standards for large buildings. It says for flat roofs or facades with a horizontal eave, fascia, or parapet, change the roof line so that no unmodulated segment of roof exceeds 100 feet measured horizontally for commercial buildings. That language is found in various other categories of different types of buildings. So it does allow for flat roofs, and we're not proposing any change under the new code. It's difficult to read.
Mr. Guerrero?
Sorry to keep interrupting, but so we run into kind of design standards in a lot of cities, and I think the intent is good that you want to have some control on what's getting built, otherwise it's kind of a free-for-all. So from that perspective, I agree we should have some controls. The challenge is meeting specific ones. So for example, I'm working on an apartment project in Puyallup right now. Their requirement is different. I actually brought graphics just to show you that, interestingly enough, their requirement would, it's kind of hard to see, but the top design is our most recent one. The bottom one is the one we presented. The bottom one didn't fly and the top one did. But I think in Lakewood, the bottom one would fly and the top one wouldn't. It's just a quirks of the design, and I guess I don't think necessarily either one of these designs is better than the other one from a pure architectural standpoint. I mean, each one has some merit. One city tells me I can do this one and not the other one. This other city tells me I can do this one and not the other one. More just an awareness that we're making these kind of decisions that impact the way people have to look at the projects.
May I respond to that, if that's okay? If there's another, I'll shut up if there's another question out there.
No, any other questions? No? Great comment, Mr. Guerrero, but
There is a section in the code that allows the director some discretion, okay? And if we're talking about minor deviations, it results in generally the same intent of what we're trying to do. I think that overall, we're pretty flexible. So I'll go back and take a look at that, but I do agree with Mr. Guerrero. I don't want to get so specific that we end up doing kind of funky things that we don't mean to. The other issue is I'd like to meet offline with Mr. Guerrero as he speaks to these setbacks and the like, because I'm not sure I completely understand that. And before I'm ready to comment, I think you and I need to spend a little bit more time. I'm trying to understand it. Basically for the commission, we're talking about the cutouts, so you don't end up with a building that's just entirely flat. And should it be 10 feet or 5 feet and things like that? I understand what Mr. Guerrero was talking about, but I need to make sure that I have a clear picture.
yes, Mr. Guerrero.
And I would like to clarify, my project in Puyallup has been ongoing through a design review committee, which Lakewood doesn't have. And I've been before them 4 or 5 times with different designs and I think I actually have finally come to a conclusion, but the owner almost dropped the project because of the process. And in working with Lakewood, I have not had those problems at all. Staff has been great to work with, but staff does turn over. And so at some point, this code will be interpreted by someone else and they may not be as friendly as far as looking at the overall intent of the code versus what the words say. So.
Okay?
Yep, good, thank you.
And then what we're talking about really is the building modulation. You see that where Commissioner Guerrero is talking about whether there should be a 10-foot modulation or something different. So that's the area that we need to go back and talk about. The next one is Mr. Guerrero points out that the landscape architect need not approve irrigation plans, and that he oftentimes uses a individual who is what's the term? A certified irrigation designer. So we have included that terminology into the proposed amendment and then define what a certified irrigation designer is. And so I just wanted to point that out. The next topic is dealing with the landscaping standards. So really, we are not making any major change just to this section, but Mr. Guerrero suggests changing the slope from 1 to 3 to 1 to 2. I think personally that the 1 to 3 ratio results in a higher percent gradient, which potentially creates more erosion, not less. So our recommendation would be to stay to 1 to 2.
Mr. Guerrero?
I think your recommendation is stay to 1 to 3, and I was suggesting 1 to 2. And so I was suggesting a little steeper. And I was suggesting that to be somewhat consistent with civil engineering standards, if I'm not mistaken, 1 to 2 is what's considered an angle of repose. So if you dump a pile of dirt, it kind of sits at a 1 to 2 slope. That's why I was suggesting it, although
Okay.
it does make it easier for us to grade sites on occasion. But.
So are you saying I wrote this wrong?
No, you wrote it right. I think you said it wrong. So you were saying, the code was saying not to exceed 1 to 3. I was suggesting going to 1 to 2, which is steeper. And you were saying, no, we want to stay at 1 to 3, which is flatter. So.
Number 16, tree preservation, is this a new chapter? The answer is no, but there are some minor changes being proposed. We have included a table that talks about the maximum tree removal on existing single-family lots without a permit. And the reason this has come up is the current code is pretty restrictive, and you're allowed to take out 1 tree a year, and that's it. And so what this is doing is giving some flexibility so you can take out a few more trees annually than just 1 tree, and the number of trees is based upon the lot size. So this is trying to be accommodating to the hundreds of tree removal permits that we review on an annual basis.
Yeah.
And that's what that's about. And some people may not like this. So some people are very clear that they want to see all trees stay. And so I'm just pointing that out.
Yes,
The oth-
Mr. Guerrero?
So the table you provided us has some marks in red. Are those, so I'm seeing it, so for example, the table has lots up to 17,000 square feet, 2 in red, and then it's crossed out and says NA.
Yes, I messed up. Fixing that.
Okay.
The more I looked at that, allowing up to 6 trees to be removed, may be pushing that envelope. But, you know, if you guys can tell me otherwise. Next is parking regulations. Mr. Guerrero asked some very specific questions on transportation demand management. And so I started taking a look at that, and I says, well, wait a minute, there's a couple of other things we need to take a look at. So you see some new sections about unlisted uses. What do you do when you have unlisted uses, and what type of parking shall you require? So we added a new piece on that. And so there's 3 categories, and then under parking standards, okay, this is kind of confusing. I'll try my best. You have other agencies at the regional level trying to push cities to reduce the number of vehicles on the road and reduce parking. So there's this thing called transportation demand management, and there's several different ways of going about it. You can offer up programs where you reduce the number of commutes. You basically say if you have an office building of 50,000 square feet or larger, you have to come up with ways of reducing the number of trips. You could also talk about if you do reduce the number of trips, you can also reduce the number of parking spaces. And some of these get very, very convoluted and complex. And this is a topic that's been a point that was discussed in our Puget Sound Regional Council certification that we did not address transportation demand management. So this is an effort to offer up a voluntary program for transportation demand management, where over time, if a business wants to participate in that type of program, they can do so by reducing their total number of parking spaces. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that when we go up for review the next time for certification, we can say that we have got something on the code and this is the way it works. And I'm trying to do it in a simplified fashion without having a lot of more regulation. So that's what this looks like. There was a few places that were blank. I went back and filled those in or put not applicable. So that's the intent here. This actually came from the city of Lacey as a way or a means to address TDM in their current code. You can use it if you want to. It's entirely voluntary. If you don't, then you just keep the minimum number of parking spaces, and then we put in a code reference.
So what I think I heard, so this says optional minimum. So say I have a 1,000 square foot business. I can go up to 4 parking spaces maximum or 2 minimum. Is that correct? And then the TDM would apply if I wanted to try to reduce below 2.
Yes.
Okay.
It's trying to provide people options. This is another way of reducing parking spaces if you have a tight site. The next thing is Commissioner Guerrero, I added a new thing called unknown uses. There's unlisted uses, and then there's unknown uses. So, and this has to do basically with commercial and industrial projects where you come in and they build something and it's a shell, and you don't know exactly what it is that they're going to do until they put in the next level of TIs. This is the process that we can talk about the number of parking spaces for the shell and the ultimate number of parking spaces when the final TIs are complete. This gets really, I don't know if you're interested, this gets really technical at the planning level, at current planning, so I'm just trying to think of everything. And then Commissioner Guerrero, these are my words. Some of the tables and stuff were a little difficult to read as far as parking space dimensions. So this is my attempt to clarify that. So we've gone from 3 graphics with all this engineering gobbledygook to basically 1 graphic and a table. So that should be easier to read.
Mr. Guerrero.
Could I meet with you later on that one, too? Could I meet with you later on that
Sure.
one also?
The next one is, again, as a result of Commissioner Guerrero's talking about parking. This one kind of came up if you have an existing building and you have parking in the back, what is the driveway dimension? And so we've addressed that with 12 feet. And then something that we address quite frequently via administrative policy is tandem parking spaces. So there's a whole new section on tandem parking spaces. So yes, you may ask a question on one subject, but as we go through and study this, there's other things that come up. So I do appreciate it. And then we have new definitions for certified irrigation designer. Heavy equipment, I included that definition specific to home occupation permits because I do not wish to get into arguments with people over what heavy equipment means. A landscape architect, passenger vehicle, tandem parking, and then a generalized definition for transportation demand management. And then here are the other comments from others that we have included. Some of these we've already made changes. And then at the very bottom in gray, we have comments that we received very late from David Kruger with WIG Properties. They own commercial property on 100th Street in Bridgeport Way. As you can see, they have a rather extensive list of comments. We went through most of these this afternoon. We addressed most of them. On some others that we're going to have to spend a little more time on. So when we come back, we'll pick up those, as well as the additional comments that Mr. Purrier raised this evening. There's also a few little loose ends I just wanted to bring to your attention. We have a lot of 18A that's addressed in Title 15, 16, 17, and 18B. So we're going to try to tie that together with the code revisor when you adopt your resolution as well as with the City Council and their ordinance. 18B is a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to be meeting with the City Attorney's Office on that one. That's why I wish to extend the public hearings. So,
Correct.
so that's a really brief review. I think I have a pretty good understanding of some of the things Mr. Guerrero would like to take a look at. We have no problem doing that, as well as some of the other comments from commission members.
Yeah, any other questions or comments for staff? Hearing none. I do have just a clarification. So residential housing, existing housing, where would I find some restriction on, we're seeing a lot of, in residential areas, multiple cars being parked all over the front yards, driveways, backyards, multiple of these housing. I'm sure there's multiple residents in there, I don't know, but they're coming and going. Where would is there a restriction, I should say, of the amount of cars? Okay?
No, except for large commercial vehicles, semi-trucks that are parked on the street or on single-family residential property, but the city has not addressed the number of residential vehicles allowed in zoning, and it may not, that you may not want to. I know that some cities adopt ordinances that say you cannot park your car in the front yard except on the driveway. And so that creates a lot of hostility. I just want to let you know you need to think about that if that's what you wish to do. I've seen some communities do that, and it requires a lot of public outreach. We also have more people living in residential units, sometimes legally and sometimes illegally. And if we're trying to address that through rental housing, and we see it. But a lot of people have a lot of vehicles, and it's an issue. And I don't have a good answer.
Not 15 in a three-bedroom
Well,
house, but.
Well, then we also have people, we have an interesting situation in downtown, in Oak Brook, where we have a person that's actually involved in he's selling cars on the internet. Okay, and then he goes over to Fort Steilacoom Park and he takes photographs of the cars to sell on the internet. And so there's these transactions that are going on all the time that we're not even aware of. But in my opinion, he's actually having a used car lot, and his base of operations is his home. But trying to prove this is very difficult, and so we have to catch the guy who comes in and brings the cars, and then we have to find out who the cars are registered to, and so we have to go through this process. So it's not always what you see, it's what you can prove.
Okay, so next question, if I could. So adult family home, group home, when they apply for application, do they not have to inform the abutting properties?
No, they're not required to do that.
Okay, I think those are the two questions, simple and fast.
One
Mr.
of the
Wegman.
things that we will be looking at separate from this whole process, we have a cost recovery report that's due to the city council. We have determined that we spend an excessive amount of money in adult family home permitting review. So you will be seeing, the council will be seeing a substantial increase in permit fees as it pertains to that particular use. I will also tell you that we have an issue with illegal conversions of single-family homes to adult family homes without permits. And we do catch people, and we ended up with some very heated discussions at the permit counter.
So I do have one more question. Maybe not, I just lost it, so go ahead, Mr. Wegman.
Yeah, my question is on vehicles, parking in your front yard, say, do they have to be licensed?
Okay, this goes to various sections of the code. There's Title 8, and then there's also the traffic ordinance within the city of Lakewood. It's a different title enforced by the Lakewood Police Department. If you're going to really take a hard look at number of vehicles, I don't think it's just going to be zoning. You're going to have to look at other sections of the municipal code to address it in a more comprehensive manner. Because, for example, the large heavy trucks on residential streets is not permitted, but that's found not in 18A, that's found somewhere else. I've also been asked to address, the questions come out, how to prevent large commercial trucks from parking overnight in commercial zones. And I've examined many municipal codes to see if that is addressed. The answer is generally it's not. But how it is addressed is that you're prohibited from parking large commercial trucks on residential streets or in residential zoning districts, period. That's generally how it's used. There are some cities, most notably in California, adjacent to the coast, that restrict commercial trucks and RVs from parking in commercial vacant lots. And so that's the only thing that I can find. When we approved the conditional use permit for Walmart, that permit required them to prohibit RVs from parking on their lot. And if you go there, you'll see the signs. So they actively enforce that. So some things we've done well, but this issue is one that I think a lot of communities wrestle with. And it's a bigger discussion than just zoning. I guess that's my final thought.
Okay, any other follow-up questions? Hearing or seeing none, I thank you for all the questions submitted and all of your diligent work.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move to number 8, new business, 2020 Comprehensive Plan Amendment docket.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Allow me 1 second to get into that presentation. right, so it's hard to believe, but we're already at the beginning of another comprehensive plan amendment cycle. This one for next summer. So if you recall from last year, and you've predated me with my time at the city, but this happens every time, I guess, where the initial docket comes to you for recommendation, and then it goes to the council, and they decide if they want to add or subtract or change any of the initial docket list. And then once that's approved by them, then staff begins the substantive review of those applications. It'll come back to you next spring, summer. You make one more substantive recommendation back to council, and then they would take action on the docket. So where we are tonight is the very first step. We've got the initial application lists. The deadline to submit applications for this cycle was last Friday. And so I'm just going to walk you through what was submitted so far. This is also in your second staff report. It's the last subsection of the report. It's the last 4 or 5 pages, but it'll also be in front of you through this PowerPoint if you're having difficulty finding it in that staff report. So in terms of the schedule, as of right now, tonight we're doing this introduction. There will be a public hearing on the docket list at your next meeting, October 2nd. And then the idea, presumably, but this is not set in stone, is that October 16th you would be ready to take action on just that docket list. So again, it's not a substantive review of any of them. It's just, what do you think of the list itself? And then that would move forward to council. They are currently scheduled to look at this starting November 25th, and they also are thinking it would be a relatively quick review. So their last meeting of the year, December 2nd, they would be approving this docket for review by staff. So beginning in December and moving into next year would be that review by Community and Economic Development Department. Next June, roughly, you would have a public hearing again on now each staff recommendation and the full content of each one of these applied for amendments. And then next summer, early fall, the City Council would be adopting the package. So what we have this time around is one comprehensive plan text amendment, which is being initiated by the city. There's one privately initiated map amendment, and then there's 6 city-initiated map amendments. As always, there's the SEPA review, the Department of Commerce review, the Planning Commission's public hearing, and then the council's public hearing in action. So I'm just going to walk through each one of these. Please stop me if you have any questions. This is the text amendment that's being proposed. Again, this is city-initiated. There is currently a mismatch not a conflict, but an inconsistency between what's allowed in the comprehensive plan's low and high density ranges for residential estate and single-family residential. So you see that in that top table there. Right now, what is allowed in the residential estate is a high of 2 units, and under single-family residential, what's currently allowed is a high of 6 units. But if you go into our municipal code, you will look down into 18A 4580, and that's actually a different number. So under residential estate in the comprehensive plan is a suggested change to allow a high of 4, and then under single-family residential, a high of 9. And what that does is just make the comprehensive plan and 18A consistent. This for you on the maps is a very crude way of showing you there's various locations throughout the city this time that would be affected by comprehensive plan applications. Much more internal to the city than it was this last time around, which really was around the outside edges. But this is where they are generally along some main corridors. The first map amendment is the one that's privately initiated. It affects 3 parcels on the corner of Custer and Bridgeport Way. And what you have here are 4 different maps showing the same area. So the first one on the top left is simply the parcel itself. The one on the top right shows you the ortho. So there's several existing buildings and then some standing trees and other vegetation. The bottom 2 are the land use map as it currently sits, and then the zoning map as it currently sits for those parcels. So what's being proposed is to move from mixed residential to multifamily on the land use designation and mixed residential to multifamily 2 on the zoning. And the idea there is to allow for higher density within the parcels that would be rezoned, but there would also be, according to the applicant, the maintenance and the preservation of the vegetation, or most of the vegetation and trees that you see on the lot, and then the building would occur on the area that's already bare.
Mr. Guerrero has a question.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to mention I'm the architect of record for this project, so I'll recuse myself from it.
Okay.
The next map amendment is a city-initiated one, and it's on a single parcel that's immediately to the south of what we just talked about. So this is a larger parcel, as you can see by the maps, and it is currently zoned in error, or excuse me, designated in error on our land use map as neighborhood district, when in fact it's zoned multifamily 2. And so this is a Scrivener correction almost, where we're changing that parcel's designation to multifamily in order to be consistent with the zone. So this would not change the zoning on this parcel, this would simply correct the map. And again, you'll see the parcel, the ortho, and then the land use map and the zoning map designations for that area. The third city map amendment affects 8 parcels, and these are along 111th and Bridgeport Way. You'll see the parcel numbers are listed. And then the map shows you that this is along 112/111th, and it's that line of parcels from east to west. There's a total of 8, and the idea is to redesignate from corridor commercial to multifamily, and to change the zoning from commercial 1 to multifamily 3. The next one is on the in the area of 59th and Stillicum, and this is a larger suggested change, 22 parcels. The idea is to redesignate from neighborhood business district to high-density multifamily, and then to change from neighborhood commercial zone to multifamily zone. And what this does, showing you the ortho as well, but what this does is basically change the light pink on the top map there to that same orange color that you see just below it, so it would be consistent with the properties just to the south and to the west. And then on the bottom map, which shows the hot pink, that's the zoning map, that would also change then to that tan color that you see at the bottom. This next one is a little bit up in the air still, and if you remember from our last comprehensive plan amendment package, there was a discussion about Springbrook and the idea of rezoning a number of parcels within the Springbrook area per council request to industrial. And the decision was made to hold off on that because the city was re-examining and asking FEMA to re-examine the floodplain mapping within the Springbrook neighborhood. And the thought was at the time that given how long that would take, it was premature to do any sort of rezoning in 2019 or into 2020. And so let's take a look at this once that study is done and the verification has occurred of where the floodplain and the flood areas are. We anticipate that that answer will be available by the end of this year, and so this is coming back into the package again. It's 19 or so parcels within Springbrook that would potentially be rezoned based on the outcome of that study. I will say that within the next couple of weeks, the City Council is going to hear the results of that study, and then we'll be able to give more information back to you. But for now, it's just a placeholder to say that those would be under consideration again based on what is found with the flood mapping. And then the next one is a single parcel at roughly the corner of Washington Boulevard and Interlochen Drive Southwest. This is to rezone, redesignate that parcel from neighborhood business district and mixed residential, moving from neighborhood business district to mixed residential, and the zone would be changing from neighborhood commercial 1 to mixed residential 2. And that would take the pink in the bottom left and have it match the brown color just to the south. On the bottom right map, again, that lighter or hotter pink to that brown color, so making it consistent with the property across the street. And then the final one is taking the Lakewood Transit Station itself. There are 2 parcels involved with that building, and changing it from the corridor commercial and transit-oriented development designation and zone to take that building, this transit station itself, and rezone and redesignate it to public institutional. So that's simply a correction based on what that building is and the function it serves. That would not change the zoning around it. It would remain that transit-oriented development area, but just the building itself would change. So those are the 7 or 8 that we have as of right now. The way this is scheduled, oops, what did I do? Sorry. Is again, there will be a public hearing on this on October 2nd, should there be any questions or concerns about the proposed amendments. And then presumably the next meeting, you would be prepared to take action and send this on to the council. So if there's any questions, I'm
Any
happy to answer them.
questions? Hearing or seeing none, we thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and we move to number 9, Mr. Branstetter. You have any comments tonight?
Only a few, Mr. Chair. We've actually had some rather short meetings since the last time you met, so we haven't done that. But that most significant thing is that we did renew the contract of the city manager for another year. I don't know, we get into September of finishing his evaluation for the prior year. We have every intention of doing better than that, but it just sort of takes that long. But we found that we're well served by Mr. Caulfield. Okay, in terms of both his leadership and his knowledge and his very evident and legitimate concern for the community, and the council finds that it's really in our best interest to work to keep him here, to be able to go and do that. We did hold a ribbon cutting and event for the Complete Streets project at the Colonial Plaza. I think it remains to be seen what the public eventually decides to call the space. However we're doing it, but it was a well-intended ceremonial date to have, to be able to go and do that, showcase the potential of what could go on there. And we're hoping that along with the fact that the QFC, that building and the associated parcels, multiple parcels with that, has changed hands into the hands of someone who seems to actually be planning to do something with it rather than hold on to it until they can pass it off on to someone else. They've already been doing work that's being done over there. The work is primarily to clean it up, okay, where there had been trash and it had been trespassers had done things, and to do some essential maintenance. I think that, though, that despite the fact that that has happened, there is still an issue going forward as to whether the building is safe and should be abated, or whether it can be rehabilitated. And I'm not quite, I think that there's some hearings around that are scheduled, that have been scheduled since a time when it was under a previous ownership, so I'm not sure how that's going to play out, and we'll see what's going on to do that. And we're sort of working through those things. But I really don't have anything else, unless there is a curiosity about something from any of the commissioners.
Yep, Ms. Conning.
I just would like to ask, is that normal procedure to just renew the city manager's contract for 1 year, but is it yearly or?
The city manager's contract is does not have an expiration date, but it has a mandatory reevaluation annually.
Okay.
So that's why if we take our time, you know, he doesn't go home and wait on us. And that's a pretty standard process within the council manager cities. There's only about 45 council manager cities out of the 280 cities and towns in Washington State. And most places have strong mayors where someone is elective and being able to go and do that. But most of the council manager cities are cities that are in the size range of Lakewood. You know, many of the cities and towns are either quite large, like Seattle and that, and so they, you know, have huge staffs, or they're very small, like Twisp. Okay, whereas they elect a strong mayor who supervises their 20 staff and does things. So we're sort of in a thing of where we really need a professional leadership to help the council and the staff focus on the goals of the city, and I think we're well served by that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Branstetter? Seeing or hearing none, we'll move on to reports from the staff.
Just for those who might be curious, tomorrow is kind of a big day. We have 2 abatement hearings. One is for Carwan Village, that is in the morning. That's an existing 38-unit mobile home park located on 84th Street. It's had some significant issues with failed septic systems and high police calls for service. What we're asking is that the number of units be reduced and that sewer systems be properly fixed, as well as some existing buildings on site. The other one is the abatement hearing for the QFC property. That's in the afternoon. That should be a very interesting one. The current owner is of the opinion that it can be rehabilitated. The city is the opinion that we don't have the reports yet to make that determination. And most recently, as of an inspection yesterday, one of the exterior walls is bowed. And there's some questions about its attachments to the roof. The roof will need full replacement. And then there's actually a tree going up on the roof as a result of some of the erosion and the fact the roof has never been cleaned. So, and we have lots of asbestos as well as lead in the building. So we'll see what happens.
Question though, I see a lot of people are commenting on the chain link fence around that QFC building. It says Pierce County Sheriffs are training for canine dog training. What's that?
The owner put that up to try to scare transients away.
Okay.
So it was a little bit of gamesmanship on his part to keep people from coming on the site.
I thought, wow.
So I just went, that's his thing, not mine.
Well, Pierce County Sheriff's, he has a nice logo, I mean, to customize that sign. I thought, wow.
Well, the sign code, since sign code doesn't address content whatsoever.
Yeah, right, yeah, whatever you want. That's pretty clever.
Unless the sheriff's department complains, I'm not doing anything with it.
Pretty clever.
Okay.
That is clever.
Clever.
Okay, I'll make, only thing is I will not be in attendance on October 2nd, the next meeting. So Ms. Connie is going to preside over that meeting. And if any other commissioners, please.
No, I won't be there either.
Okay, so we need to make sure we have a quorum for October 2nd. So the other, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so just make sure if everyone's available and let staff know so they can plan, since there is a full agenda on that day. So, all right. Other than that, any comments from Ms. Tiffany?
I'm sorry. Just very quickly, on October 2nd, you do have the discussion about the docket hearing for the 2020 comp plan amendments. There's the action on the open space and recreation rezone. October 16th would be 18A continued of the hearing, should there be any other comments, coupled with any other discussion you may want to have, and then action on the comprehensive plan amendment docket. And then, as of now, November is open for 18A. So there's 2 meetings that would be happening, the second one being the week prior to Thanksgiving, so hopefully that won't be a problem for anyone. But we do have those 2 more meetings where we could be talking 18A if needed.
Any other reports from fellow commissioners? Comments? Hearing none. Thank you for everyone's input, and we'll call the meeting adjourned.